Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George-Affleck.
And it's time for
Ain't no sunshine when it rains. Ugh, UnSpun.
I've never needed the sun more. Oh my gosh.
Oh my God. It's a little bit sunny out there right now as we record. I think there is some prediction, but it was supposed to be sunny all week and then it turned into this World War storm. I mean, what is happening?
It's going to get better if you trust the meteorologists.
Okay,
I mean,
please.
predicting what they can here on the South Coast anyway. The interior is a whole other story. It was snowing on the Coquihalla last night. It's bizarro land.
Oh, what's happening?
I will tell you this, while you're
Yes.
hating the rain, I have been for the last 5 weeks dog sitting my girlfriend Catherine's dog while she's off shooting Amazing Race Canada. So 5 weeks of 3 dogs, and I walk them outdoors every single day off leash because I got to run them out so they don't bark behind me. 3 mucky dog baths every single day
No.
for 5 weeks.
No.
Yeah, you think you don't like dogs?
No.
I love my dogs, but today when I came back from that walk, they did not.
That's a job. That's a full-time job you basically got there.
Feels like it. Let's talk about jobs, shall we? Should we talk about sort of a... Nice. It kind of feels like a mafioso type job. Like I thought when I first saw the numbers, honest to God, George, I was like, this is a typo. This has to be a typo.
Are we talking about what? What are we talking about?
A new museum in Victoria.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh, great. I love a new museum. Oh, and it's an initiative that's tied in with First Nations, Indigenous peoples. And I love this. Good. $789 million in 8 years?
Yeah, I'm confused. Because we've been in Vancouver through the process for the art gallery, still to be built. And I think it came in at $250 or something. It's quite a lot of money still. But obviously, the most expensive piece of property in Vancouver, Victoria, they already have the property, so they're going to tear the other one down and build a new one. Is that the plan?
That is. They're like, oh, you know what? Here, I'm going to go one step further, George. Guess how much they invested in that very building last year?
Oh God, I think I know this, but go ahead and tell us.
$12 million.
Excellent.
Of taxpayer dollars spent to upgrade. 12 million. So we're talking about an $800 million museum. Like,
it's fine if there'd been a process. I mean, if there had been a process and we all knew about it and thought, and we had public input and there was an engagement system and
it wasn't a pandemic and an affordability crisis with inflation and a healthcare system that's getting kerplunked.
I know.
Like, read the damn room.
It's the strangest.
Rebuild Lytton before you redo the museum.
Yes.
Oh my
good
God.
Point. And and the first week that Kevin Falcon is in the house in the Ledge, he's sworn in, and then they hand him this gift. Here's a welcome wagon has arrived. Here's your political gift to slam them for the next 2 years or whatever
8
for the next election. No, but for the next election. They've given them
a
gift.
The party will wear this for a very, very long time.
No, they're going to cancel. It's not going to happen. There's no way. It's not going to happen.
So let's unspin this then. What's the sparkly thing? What are they distracting us from right here?
Well, I mean, the fact they're probably going to have huge deficits, and I don't know. I mean, I just think that they literally thought it was a good idea. I think they're just being. They thought, there's such a Vancouver Island-based administration. The entire, Horgan never leaves the island. He never has left the island. He doesn't really understand. He went up recent. I think he's gone just for the first time up to the northeast or northwest to look at our giant dam that's being built for the first time in several years.
Yeah,
he doesn't leave the island, and so he's, people who live. No offense to people who are listeners on Vancouver Island, but and viewers. There is when you spend too much time on an island, you get island bound, or there's a mentality that the borders of the world start. I lived on an island for a while. I know this, and you sort of lose track of it's like how Vancouver or BC feels about being in Canada. We feel like we're so remote, and we have our own. It's
other side of the Rockies.
I think Vancouver Island, when you have that body of water and you never leave it. This administration that we have, these NDPers, the entire island is NDP. They've lost focus on. It's also it's quite early, but it's happening. Arrogance is setting in, and right, you see it a lot of the stuff. The Green Party's complaining about. They warned us that if they got this super majority, they would become like this. This happened in Vancouver with Vision. They became overly confident that, well, we know what's good for people because we have a super majority now, and so therefore we will do what is best for the people. It's very common, and it's the undoing of any government in the end. It may not be the next election, but it's certainly a path you see heading toward the end of the NDP, and ruling this province. It's you also, why can't they just not? Why do they not see this? Why do they not understand when they start to destroy themselves internally? You just know that behind the scenes, the caucus is now going, what? I mean, they must be torn now. I can't imagine what the caucus meetings are for the NDP right now. They're going to lose control. The whip's going to start going, hey, what are we going to do about this? That's why I think it'll get canceled in order to keep their caucus united. Otherwise, once the caucus falls apart, your party falls apart and you lose the election. And that's how you lose the elections. You don't win an election. The Liberals won't win. It'll be the NDP losing,
Right.
and them losing in their internal controls. Gordon Campbell, he won every election, and then he had to step down because of the HST, because his own caucus said, "No, dude, this was not what we agreed to. We promised we wouldn't do this, and you did it. What?" So even though a lot of them were committed to it, after they realized the sentiment was against it, they were like,
yes. I gotta say, I regret my wording off the top. I don't mean mafia or like strong arm. I'm trying to come up with a way of saying I feel like suddenly the tone deafness has reached a level that it's all about what the top tier of whoever is making the decisions has tuned out all of the little guys, and I'm pointing to myself and you because we're the little guys here,
mm-hmm.
to not even give us like the benefit of explaining how you reached that number. Like that number to me, as a born and raised British Columbian, as a born and raised Vancouverite, I've seen some pretty crazy spending in my time.
Mm-hmm.
But to throw down $789 million for a building.
Yes.
I mean, I get it. Museums need special rooms and need to be secure.
Yes.
But even then, like
proper temperatures, and it's quite.
Right,
If you've ever
I've
done a tour of the back of the art gallery when I was elected,
totally,
it's very interesting. You learn all about the complex world of historical artifacts and art and why it's important. But yeah,
right.
It's not the right time.
But let me just finish my point if I could, because the thing that gets me the most, the excuse I've heard so far the most is it's on this plot of land that's a little bit small and there's asbestos in the building, so we need to remediate that. And then we're going to have to build a taller building because of the smaller plot where the museum is. And in my head, I'm like, move the museum. The museum is in Victoria, first and foremost. So, and I did what you said about people who live on the island are very insular on what happens there, because I had somebody, I won't name them because they don't like to be public, but was very clear, like, you hear about this Falcon guy who's like all about mad about this museum. And I'm like, yeah, he's not alone. And it's not about political stripe here. It's about the cost of this. And this individual who was a longtime Victoria resident and proudly states himself as such and is of a certain age, where he said, you don't know how much money that museum brings in tourism. Like, you don't know how much money. I'm like,
not that much.
$780 million,
no.
$90 million. No.
You know what would bring more money into Victoria? Build a rapid transit system. If you cared about Victoria and you wanted to spend $700 million, build a SkyTrain so that people who live in the suburbs or tourists can go visit Bouchard Gardens or go not have to rent a car or
do the
go see all
Malahat.
the other amazing things that are on the island. There's a common words that a term that quite often right of center people, when they market the people who are conservatives and they call socialists or right left of center people, they often say they believe, they say this, and it's not religious based, but it defines how they make their decisions for the people. They say they're doing God's work. They think that people on the left side of the spectrum, this is a common conversation that the people on the because quite often in right-wing governments, they really believe in the market economy. They believe in small business. They believe in letting the market drive the economy. They don't want to get too engaged, a little libertarian if possible. Whereas, left-wing governments want to be involved. They want to put their fingers in everything. They want to control the agenda. They want to control as much as possible because they're doing God's work. We know what's best for you. You just sit down. We've got this. We've got this. We've got this. You little people, we've got this. You don't understand. You're not smart enough. No, it doesn't work because people are smart enough. The electorate is smart enough. So this could be their undoing for sure. It's certainly an indication that they've lost touch with reality. And that's great news for the Liberals and Kevin Falcon. And they are riding this one like nobody's business.
Kevin Falcon, in his first week as official opposition leader, also wasted no time in throwing down a very wedge issue, hot topic for those who live south of the Fraser, certainly, and for those who live in Richmond, whether or not the Massey Tunnel or the 10-lane bridge that the Liberals will tell you time and again, had that continued, it would have been completed this summer.
Yep.
Instead, we're still driving through. And this is not me being a Liberal. This is not me being an NDP support. This is not political stripe for me because I grew up in Tsawwassen and worked in Vancouver and commuted through that tunnel for years and years. And I still have to go back and forth because my parents live there. I'm telling you, enough now. Because my very first ever column for the Orca, my very first ever piece, almost 5 years ago now, was about the Massey Tunnel and how every single time I go through it, I hold my breath. I'm terrified. There was no seismic safe building back in the day. It's literally a couple of cement tubes sitting a bunch on top of silt. I mean, let's fix this. Come on.
And that was, talk about politics, the decision to cancel that project, hundreds of millions of dollars into it. They were ready to start building. They had laid all the strategy, all the everything was ready to go on the roadside. You could see it. The fill was in. And I was on council then, and Vancouver and Richmond and several other, and some other ones, generally NDP controlled city councils, were very against this bridge. They used a whole environmental thing, saying the bridge is not environmentally safe. And you're like, but a tunnel is not better. But they would see a tunnel is better. There's no sense to a tunnel, a bigger tunnel underwater. How can that be better environmentally than a bridge? This is what's called pavement politics. This is about, paving this or paving that, and where does the pavement lead to? What riding does it affect, negative or positive? This is the ultimate in politicking from the 1950s, really. It's ridiculous that we still have that. You can win and lose elections. Tolls. The NDP won the election. It got a minority government because of getting rid of tolls, which cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. And it doesn't. And now the province doesn't have the flexibility to reduce gas taxes like they did in Alberta because they took away hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue from the tolls. And Surrey's happy, sure. But meanwhile, those of us in Vancouver who don't drive out there and didn't care about a toll, have to pay for all these things that we don't even use. It's crazy politics. And it's going to take 10 years, more than 10 years, to get anything built across that point.
Can we talk about taxpayers paying for things that we'll never even use, like a wood splitter?
This just in. Craig James.
When we started this podcast, when we started UnSpun initially, again, historically speaking, this was the story when we started. And we're like,
we thought it would never end. And it finally has.
Here it is. Today is the day, as we are reporting.
Do you feel like throwing up?
No.
As I quote the former
Daryl Plekas. Said, when you find out, you'll feel like, and it's really, what I feel like it's brutal. It's brutal.
It's
that this happened and that it's tied up and cost us all more as this process was drawn out. It speaks to how broken so many things are, but certainly how broken it was that in clear sight that this was happening in the literal center of our provincial government in the legislature. And this is the person who runs it. It's nonpartisan. And that's not to say that everybody there knew what Craig James was doing. allegedly back then, and now confirmed that he's been found guilty on a couple of the charges, and
Mhm.
certainly, as you say, vindicates Daryl Pleckus and how he like pounded his fists on the
Yeah.
table about it. But it's brought in some good change in terms of transparency at the legislature and a note of accountability. So there's, I guess, we're moving forward to some degree, but then we
I,
see that in
I would argue, yeah, I hope so. I think that it's, if you've ever sat on a board of directors or, I even found this on council, looking at financial documents and reading the deep, people complain about Vancouver not having a proper, line by line budget and all that stuff. But, the chances of a politician actually reading that and looking at that closely is unlikely. Most politicians have very little experience understanding financial statements, even understanding
yeah
how to read an expense report or anything like that, or would consider, oh, well, the expense report, they would assume that the staff person wouldn't, that this wouldn't happen, or you have expectations of your in government of that kind of stuff not happening. That
yeah
you're focused on the projects that are being built as a financial picture, but it's your responsibility, whether you're elected into office or you're on a board of directors. The number one thing, and I act as a treasurer on my strata council because I want to make sure I know where my money's going. It's
yeah
the number one thing you should be looking at as a politician. The first thing you look at should be the money and understand how the money's coming in and how it's going out. I don't care what department you're in, or if you're on a board of directors. I don't care if you haven't learned those skills, because this is what happens. There are times when people take advantage, and it's a slippery slope sometimes. And we're seeing this with Craig James and this guilty verdict. It's disappointing, and it's the responsibility of that, what was oversight by all parties of that speaker's office, that none of them caught it. That's a testament to their inability to read financials, I would say. Who were those
yeah
people? Why weren't they able to see this stuff over years? This is inexcusable, not necessarily in the staff. This is inexcusable for the people who governed that office, and they failed us as taxpayers, and they should be held accountable as well.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Accountability is a big part of why Jason Kenney over in Alberta had a leadership
Surprise.
review. Okay, so let's just do a little history here before, because I was live on the radio in Toronto when the news dropped that
Oh,
Kenney
wow.
has resigned. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Didn't he just say how he thought at Christmas time about not continuing on as leader, but felt he must because the radical far right fringe of the party needed somebody to hold it closer to center? And then just before this vote came down, the confidence in him within his own party came down. He said, all I need is 50% plus one. Well, he got
You
51.4.
got
So he
it.
got 50 plus one plus 0.4
Yeah.
and decided immediately, yeah, I'm out.
Yeah. Well, it's a victory on his part for sure. I would say he did it, and he's smart to get out, because he wouldn't get it next time.
No.
He is got so many knives in his back now within that party. When you can only get 50% support, when your economy is starting to boom, when gas prices are at record highs, you're at a place where all the gas comes from. Their economy is skyrocketing. The electorate seem, they seem fairly okay, but his party has fallen apart with him as the leader. So he knows he's failed at that level, that he could only muster 51%. Better to leave before getting pushed. And he can now say with confidence, I did have the support of the majority of the people. It was my
Right.
decision. And, it's, having been in politics, it's not a lot of fun when people don't like you. It's not
But
like,
you
no
are
human
so
wants.
loved, George.
Not by
Everybody
the,
loves
yeah,
George
but not day
Affleck.
to, yeah, but day to day in council with this,
No, for
majority
sure.
vision who would pound at me like for hours and hours. I'd get beaten and beaten,
Not
by
fun.
them on all issues where I tried to take a stand, and they, you go for hours, they would be attacking me, and it's exhausting. It's no fun. I mean, some
Yeah.
people might find that fun, but I certainly didn't, and I'm sure Jason Kenney's going, okay, I'm good. I don't see a path for success here. And frankly, do I need to take this beating anymore from my own party, where things are starting to turn around in this province, given the nightmare that they've lived through for over 10 years. So, adios. It also gives him the ability to leverage his role as a former premier. He'll get in lots of great boards. He'll make a lot of money. If he'd
Yeah.
been booted, his credibility and his
His
leverage would
stock
be
would dive.
weakened.
Yeah, his stock would
Totally.
nosedive like the Dow Jones did this week. Let's
Yes.
talk local. Let's talk municipal politics,
Let's not get into that. I
Baxter.
don't even look at my
Oh
stocks
my
right
God.
now.
I don't know. Don't look at your statements,
Yeah,
people.
just wait a couple months.
Inflation, affordability, gas prices, all those things.
Yeah.
We could talk about those for the entire 30 minutes of Unspun podcast, but we need to get to the politics hitting in Vancouver City Council with regard to the Broadway plan. We talk about this a lot because it is a big deal. It is, where the direction of Broadway is going to go, the Broadway plan. Just for backstory for those who have just found us at unspunpodcast.com.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for subscribing. Like and subscribe, and
Yeah.
comment if you like. But when it comes to the actual needing of a Broadway plan, that was a federal mandate, right? Lay the groundwork here. So if somebody's just tuned in for the very first time, the Broadway plan is part of what the federal government said they needed in order to give the money for the subway that is going along
Yes, there's
Broadway. Yeah,
that connection, but it's also a connection to the regional plan.
right.
It's considered one of the major metro centers, so it's required to be developed. I think Oak Ridge is also. This is the second biggest business district in the province. So people
Yeah,
argue that why would we want to put why are we rushing this plan or both? Well, we have to because, as you noted, that there is a rule on development at the stations as part of the requirement for the funding, but also the city just needs to develop a plan along there. Partly because guess what? We're going to lose a lot of traffic on Broadway. And I hear this, you see this law, put a bike lane on there. Well, maybe, but let's, that could be the future of Broadway. It is also pretty much the only highway we have through the city
right,
where we have to have transport vehicles delivering and stuff. And it's the health district, the biggest health district in the province is this area as well. There
right.
are people that live kind of on Broadway, not really on Broadway. And there's not, even in the
Close.
planning, there's not a lot of homes that are going to be built on Broadway. Some are just off Broadway. And that's where all this focus on high rises and really taking the messaging way off course of
So
the point of the
let's
Broadway.
be specific there, because all of the conversation right now, as far as the current mayor Kennedy-Stewart is concerned, it's all about housing and rental housing on West Broadway, East Broadway, on Broadway corridor, the Broadway corridor at large, and
Mm-hmm.
how some of these older rental buildings will be torn down and taller towers will be put up, more modern spaces will be put up in their place, and then the renters will be able to access. The current renters will be then able to move into the new places and spaces at the same rate or lower rent. And then in my mind, I'm like, where are those buildings that he's talking about on Broadway? Because I can't think of any.
The smaller rental housing, yeah, there's not a
Yeah,
lot
they're
on
off
Broadway.
Broadway.
They're off
Right.
Broadway. So there are some, the Broadway plan kind of goes a block, 2 blocks into the off Broadway sort of.
Right.
It doesn't go that far off though, because you then encroach into community plans that may exist. I think the issue is how far west it goes. Maybe that's the issue for a lot of people. The majority of towers are really situated, there are some cluster over on Arbutus to the west. The majority of the major towers are from Granville Street, if you know Vancouver, over to
Can
basically Cambie. Not
Yeah.
even there because, again, that's the health district. In one thing I learned in office was about health site developments and in health, the health, and how you build a building in healthcare. So any of these buildings that might be related to healthcare, height is effective in controlling any kind of viruses or anything like that. The old days of building hospitals and medical facilities,
Sprawl. Yeah.
sprawl is a really ineffective approach to and dangerous. And so there's a real movement. If you look at what's happening up at the hospitals, the children's, they're higher now.
Yeah.
Because it's safer. And so some of these buildings are medical facilities and medical buildings that we need to have in the medical healthcare district of the province.
Right.
Once again,
But remember the Laurel building was built and then there wasn't enough money to staff it. So there was this tower that nobody used. I
Well,
mean,
I mean, the VGH, the entire building was half empty for years and years. They built for the
yeah,
future. You always build healthcare facilities for the future for at least 20 or 30 years. So there's a good chance a lot
yeah.
of these buildings might be empty. I don't understand. And some of the modeling I've seen these models before. The person who does them always shows up at council, and presents these modelings that he has. He's got skills, but he's not an expert. Staff don't spend a lot of time on that kind of modeling. They never do. There's all this conversation of shadowing. Shadowing is not something that the city prioritizes. View cones are minimal. It's really about what they failed out on this plan by far is, okay, we approved the process when I was there in 2018. The process should have taken about 2 years, but the new council got elected, very dysfunctional council, as we know, and we've talked about for almost 4 years here on UnSpun. They decided to put all their energy and staff's energy into the Vancouver plan, which is this massive plan, still not finished, kind of randomly put out there. Now it's just gone. We'll never see that thing again. And
Was it $30 million?
yeah, 20. Oh yeah, it's millions.
Yeah,
And then we have
yeah.
the Broadway plan, which should have been the priority for them, and we set the table for them to do it. And they could have had it done, and they wouldn't have had all the politics. It wouldn't have been an election year. They could have done it in 2 years, and they could have probably done better community consultation because they would have had staff focused. And then they could have started the city plan, the Vancouver plan, maybe after that. But they were so obsessed with their own Vancouver plan and putting their own stamp as a council on stuff that was new and shiny that they forgot one of the most important plans that we set forward that was required, as you noted, that they didn't take care of, and they let it ride for now 4 years, and now they're facing an election in a few months. They all want to get reelected. They're all afraid of special interest groups and louder citizens who are very effective. Bill Tillman, once he's involved, be careful. That guy doesn't know. He knows how to win. And so I would imagine that this will get punted, which is sad because that means another 4 years of delay, and who knows what this new
Right.
council will be and what will they want to do. And it's just one error after another, and it's the perfect metaphor of this council's incompetence in the last 3 years. This Broadway plan, it just shows you how incompetent it's the worst.
Painful because I'm not against it or for it. I just want something to actually happen. People need places to live.
Mm-hmm.
Communities need places to live. The NIMBYs in the single family dwellings throughout this city trying to just protect need to wake up to the fact that we're going to have to sprinkle some gentle density throughout all of the neighborhoods. And if we don't, people are going to ram towers into your neighborhood in urgent ways. Like that's what I see happening here, because the polarization of both sides, like ones were like, we got to wipe out everything. It's like, well, I don't know that that's true. And I don't always agree with Bill Tillman. You mentioned him, but I mean, when he started talking about, have you looked at Paris? Like, how about that? Where, you and I've talked about this many times, being that gentler, more widespread density than maybe like what we see in Burnaby, where all of a sudden tower. And you love a tower. I'm not a tower liver. I've lived
they're efficient.
I get it. But there are people who do not want to raise their children or have 2 dogs, 3 when they have their friend's dog, who don't want to live in a tower. So do I need to have a single family dwelling with a yard all the way around and protecting it from anybody to come anywhere near my neighborhood? Also, no. There's got to be some middle ground. And somebody said on Twitter, George, it's not the best plan maybe, but it's the plan we have. And if that's the selling point, we need to go back to the drawing board. But while we're back at the drawing board, as you've said since day one of this podcast, the city of Vancouver owns property. The property that is owned by the city should be developed in ways that are incentivized for the developer, or create some kind of housing, whether it's temporary or permanent, that creates housing for the people who need a place to live, period. Fix what's broken in Fairview. Fix what's broken in that city-owned land with a bunch of people watching the lease tick down in a way that's scaring the bejesus out of a lot of people, and many of them seniors, looking at maybe being, completely screwed, for lack of a better word. Like, let's tick off some of the boxes in order of, like, we're sitting here, sparkly things, 200 people coming in to talk about this plan, and it's like, what's getting done? Nothing.
Yes. Well, and the only poll I've seen is from Daily Hive and the support is very, very high for it. What is the polling? The city doesn't do this really. Check with the residents. You get 200 people coming there yelling and screaming, But meanwhile, 1 million people are going, I'm okay with it. So
See,
like,
and I'm okay with the density increasing. I have no problem. You want to build a building in my neighborhood, build a building in my neighborhood. Do I want it to be 40 stories tall? I'd prefer
that's not
not.
what this. That's not what this.
But
That's
that's
the
what I
problem.
mean.
That's
But
not what this
that's
plan
the
is. This
extremes
plan
that
is
people are
Granville to
thinking, right?
Canby. Focus
Right.
on that area, which it's called Broadway. Come on, it's a major arterial in our city. It's the most common. Like, where else would you be putting towers generally? This is an area that makes total sense. The
Yeah.
problem is that they've done terrible consultation because they've been now rushed it towards the end of this council because they want to get it approved. So staff are like, oh God, we got to get this thing done because we've got to get this thing done. Literally, we have to.
Yeah.
This
But
train
they're
is being built.
They're
It's got
freaking people
3
out.
years.
They're freaking people out outside of what you just explained. Because I think if it was really targeted, if it was like, this is between Canby and Granville, and it's not about housing, it's about business. I think that those 200 people that are screaming about housing in council wouldn't be there if it was focused on business. Like, get it done. And the whole conversation about upzoning and what'll happen and who will make money off what, again, that brings us back to a whole different conversation. It's just been thrown all together and made political in an election year. October 15th, 2022, George's birthday is the day that we all go to the polls, know who's doing what, and know that you only need to check the ballot on those who you want to be representing and spending your tax dollars. And you got to follow George at George_Affleck on Twitter, at George_Affleck. We lovingly call him underscore around here. You can find me at Jody Vance, at Jody with a Y Vance on Twitter. Give me a follow there. And we're going to keep talking about this. UnSpunPodcast.com. UnSpunPodcast.com. Next week, I promise I'm going to get into this story from a friend of mine who I graduated from high school with, a restaurateur who is absolutely beside herself. She's got a friend of hers in the restaurant industry who is literally, George, been waiting a year for permitting and licensing. We're going to get into it next week in a way that somebody needs to pick up the story and run with it. Okay, there you go. Tune in next week.
Tell her to call me too if she wants.
Sally, call George. Okay.
All right. We'll see you next week. Bye.